that is, I think, from the start out, a very, very important thing for people to understand about me, that I don't think, maybe I shouldn't be saying that about myself, but I don't think I have a big ego. I don't think I'm somebody who needs to be patting myself on the shoulder every day and saying, yeah, Stefan, well done, you're the best. But really staying humble and making sure that I can portray to others how I would like them to behave. Then this all becomes a very, very easier path to explaining what type of things to achieve. So um, you heard now two things about myself. I mentioned the word humble, but I bring it down to behaving in a way that I would call this uh, ethical. You call this transparent. You call it talking about now. Besides
It,
this
it
very big,
sounds like you've described quite a few qualities there so far. Starting with good luck, having the right people around you, having good bosses, having being humble, setting a framework and then let people doing their thing, not micromanaging. I think
yeah,
I may have missed one or two in summarizing, but that sounds like it sounds like quite a few things. It's not just any single thing, but a whole bunch of different attributes and skill sets, attributes with a dose of luck. But a lot of people have doors opening for them in their lives, right? I mean, you know, and I both know tons of people. Not everyone reaches the a top, an uppermost or pinnacle of a particular profession. So if you're in an organization, I mean, CEO is a pretty good title, right? So you're CEO of a bank, of a large bank, one of the largest banks in the world, and you're based in Singapore and Hong Kong, uh, and you've described many different qualities that took you from a particular level or two levels below where you are right now to where you are here. But is there any particular thing that you think that you have not mentioned, or is it a lot of people have no egos? You said low egos, limited egos. Yes. To be fair, in banking, most of us have egos. Most of us have big egos. Most people in banking have. So I think that I think is a very powerful point that you made. Not having a huge ego. Is there
but
anything else, Stefan, that you would
I
like to
think
add?
the one point which I think is it's more like a principle, but it has bit me badly at times. But in the long run, it has been always the thing which I believe is helps me to navigate complicated situations. I am, and I really mean this in the most honest way, completely transparent. I mean, I don't hold hidden agendas. I don't try to play things out in the way of saying, "Oh, let's manufacture some hidden pathways and let's see how we can maneuver around people." Yeah, it's technically definitely able to get results. I find it just personally very, very hard in the long run to sustain something where it's not open, it's not honest. So again, the transparency, and I mean this really in the most radical way in some instances, has helped me a lot. For example, when I took first a C-suite job, and I went from being a business manager in an area in RBS to the regional COO, there was a benchmarking of where we are required. And it had a pretty drastic message to it of where the institution was. And it wasn't a pretty message. It wasn't one which was kind of saying nice things when actually it was reasonably clear that things weren't going so well for the institution. Putting in difficult situations the transparency first and foremost, maybe is a bit of a shock element to it. Maybe you call it a slightly more German approach to things, but I find this extremely, extremely helpful because then people know where I'm standing. I become subject to potentially being then becoming part of somebody's bigger play and become vulnerable. But I accept that vulnerability in exchange for being clear and open about the messages which I want to send and how I think things need to happen. Again, it makes me vulnerable, but I accept this any given day over the ability to, in exchange for the ability to communicate to my teams, to stakeholders, internally, externally, with all the transparency in my mind required. It takes the element of politics down to a much, much lower level. It doesn't go away. And the more senior one becomes, there's always a political maneuvering required, but not in a Machiavellian bad way, where you're really being seen as somebody who is manipulating people in a way that the transparency is completely overshadowed by some kind of game theory of the manager. That wouldn't be me.
I think that's an excellent point, Stefan. You're making the point that you don't spend your energy gaming the system or planning, playing the chess move game. Rather, you just tell it as it is. You're extremely transparent. That kind of makes you a little bit vulnerable in a way, but clearly has some advantages to it in the sense you don't have to spend that time and energy to think through things in 5 different ways and what a particular person might think or feel. You lay the framework and you just put it out there as you see it. So I think that I would say is not the most typical approach that I have come across in my interactions with senior people. But I think it's extremely refreshing and clearly something that has helped you succeed.
Well, I had reviews in my earlier parts where people said, "Oh, you're not political enough. You need to be more gaming." And my reply was like, "Well, I could do that, but I'd rather spend the time and energy to actually put myself into the shoes of people I want to work with and listen to them and then try to understand them." That's also quite a time-consuming exercise, but one where then I can garner for the team, for the organization, for myself, much better outcomes. So again, it's a personal choice. I know it's not necessarily one which everybody would subscribe to, but for me, it has worked very well. So it's probably with hindsight that I can say it has worked well. It might have been for other people who take that approach a complete career-ending decision because they suddenly don't get anywhere. So in hindsight, I can probably say more relaxed, but I thought about it quite a fair bit. What actually was the most basic one principle I always adhere to, and it was this transparency. And this is transparency. So up to date, I mean, people who know me now better over the years can probably see that this is a very recurring theme and not just a buzzword on the top of a CV or something.
I can definitely attest to that, and I can see that you have not changed in that regard, which is amazing. I mean, to become a CEO and a CEO of an organization, and to still be able to be comfortable and successful telling it as it is with minimal or no adverse consequences, is amazing. A lot of senior managers in organization talk about, at top management rather, not so much senior management, about being able to navigate the gray areas, but you come across as a more black and white person and who doesn't like to spend too much time operating in the shades of gray.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm also faced on a daily basis with situations where there are multiple views and multiple opinions and scenarios, and that's all completely fine. I'm not saying there is just one way to get things done. That would be the wrong what I said. There's always, in my mind, the absolute necessity to listen and make sure that different scenarios, these options are being thought through. But once it becomes clear what actually is going to be the decision to be taken, and then leading into execution, that's then something which I think is a much easier journey once the transparency for everybody is clear. So I mentioned just one word, and this is also for me important: the execution focus, putting strategy together, deciding what the path is for organization, either building a new business, investing, or stopping something or closing it down. In either way, is basically the strategy, the planning part. But when it then comes to execution, I've seen in finance quite often scenarios where people, if it wouldn't be finance, the outcome would be disastrous. I mean, I'm always have this analogy when if many people in finance would behave like engineers who are building aircrafts, many of these aircrafts would not be really in the air for a long time. They would have faults which are not maybe obviously from the outside. It looks maybe good, shiny, metal frame, wings on everything, but if it doesn't, as a totality, fly, and that's in the most literal sense of the word, if it doesn't fly, well, it comes crashing down, and that is something which I think But once you start hiding faults, once you start putting things into the under the carpet and saying, well, that's not so important now, yeah, it might still be good to glide along, but it might lead to fatal crashes. So that's where my risk tolerance is very low to have these not clearly put forward things, mostly biting myself. I mean, this is something which I don't try to also hide, that I'm very clear about risk appetite and mitigants to risk. But as long as I am clear of this upfront, then people know what they can expect from me.
Excellent. Stefan, just to move the subject a bit.
Yes.
Now, in banking, as you obviously know, there are various kind of resources. You have capital, you've got people, you have technology, you have traders, salespeople, structurers. What do you see as most important in the industry right now, in your opinion, for the typical commercial and investment bank?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I think banking has become ever more commoditized, and it's very hard to be in a very bespoke niche with very bespoke offerings and scale this up. Yes, there are niches where people can play happily, and you maybe know institutions who do this. But if you talk about bulge bracket commercial banks like an MUFG, which doesn't offer lots of sexy things, but which offer basically the basics. They're lending money. They are providing a simple tool set of hedging rates and currency risks, and they are providing at an entry point some investment solutions. That's kind of what an MUFG is. Other banks have maybe a stronger focus on providing more of the asset side of the balance sheet solutions. But for a place like us, it's mostly around being able to scale up what we're doing in a way that it makes the economic success not dependent on hitting a one-time large trade or a one-time elephant deal, but really scaling the boring parts to something which actually then returns on capital what is needed. So I think in that respect, if the underlying mindset of people is that we are not here to necessarily build rockets which fly to the moon. That's quite different from what you and I probably also did previously at our jobs at Deutsche, for example, where it was quite often around making sure that the most advanced and most technically interesting things become available to clients. Nowadays, it's a lot about commoditization. That's a buzzword. Now, the IT angle is important, but I don't think I would overstress that too much. For me, the most important thing is that people really understand if you have decided to sell green and blue shirts, meaning let's say FX and rates, then you should make green and blue shirts in the most efficient way, how the customers want them. And if the sleeves need to be adjusted or the collar is too tight, then make that. But don't suddenly start to make orange pants. So that is where I think the scaling of what somebody has chosen as their market is really important. Also, I think quite often what gets forgotten is some banks have massive advantages in some areas, and they don't play to the natural advantages. MUFG, for example, has one mega great advantage. It's basically a really big carry trade. They're taking in the funding in Japan, where the rates are negative and super low. That funding is actually, in the end, relatively cheap, and they are using it to their advantage in their home market. They have consciously decided to run a massive dollar-yen basis swap when they go into for overseas markets because they don't have much dollar funding compared to other banks. But that's what they've decided. They are a massive carry trade, and they can use that to bring capital and simple hedging solutions to people in the corporate and FI world around the world. Very simple, not rocket science, and that's I think is really the important thing. Decide what the institution is really competitively good at, and then just leverage as much as you can. I mean, don't try to do things just because other people do them well that you can do them. We try to do structured notes, and badly. It's not what this place is about. This place is not about hedging illiquid market parameters and unobservable Greeks, which are not tradable. That's something which this place is not good at. So we just don't do it. And I think that's my main message. Choose your basics and then just make them as large in your business model as you can, because otherwise it runs the risk of becoming extremely retrading slow.
That makes sense. So what I'm also trying to get at is how important are people to you, and what's more important, people, capital, or technology? If you had to choose, just pick one word: people, capital, or technology, or rank them. How would you rank the three?
People, technology, capital.
People, technology, capital. Sounds good to me. Which then leads me to the subject I am particularly interested in: people. Now, among your many roles as CEO, Stefan, is talent identification one of them? And if so, how do you and your team go about identifying talent internally or externally? And what qualities and values do you look for when you hire someone?
Yeah, I mean, for not only at MUFG, but generally speaking, the team which I have worked with and who worked for me over the last 5, 8, 10 years or so, the most important thing for me was that talent is coming to the team at a quite junior stage. Yeah, sometimes you need to hire senior people because there is a gap which you just need to fill immediately. But
Sure.
the filling the pipeline with junior people who are basically having the underlying understanding of I use the word engineering. Again, engineering means lots of different things in the world, not just in financial engineering, but also normal engineering. If somebody knows how to make a process work and how to actually make sure that, again, my plane analogy, the plane doesn't fall down. If people have that basic understanding that they are part of a bigger thing, and what they do well or not well influence the whole piece. That are people who can then be trained a lot. I mean, I personally do not value the specific education of a certain university with a certain degree as the most important thing to start hiring people. For example, I don't really look out anymore at all if people have actually a degree at all or not. I mean, that's for me not the most important thing. So if somebody has a degree from university or not, that doesn't necessarily make them get onto the pile of people who get interviewed. So I really look out for other qualities. I look out for qualities where people have the ability to explain to me why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, are they interested in something, or is it just a job to make an income? Secondly, I want to make sure that people have the ability to understand how, and you as a structurer understand this, how the individual pieces of something larger fit together and how they can make sure that the little piece, or slightly bigger depending on seniority, what they are working on, how that piece needs to be really well done to make the overall picture completely nice looking. That's for me our basic understanding. It's very hard to find these qualities on a CV. So I do a lot of interviewing with people and tell them right away that this is not a sign that you have made it into the first step of being hired out of under five people. I rather interview more and try to find these qualities. So people from a junior stage, and then once they're on the team, build them into individuals who can grow. And again, one risk there comes to transparency. They might be hired away by other institutions very fast once they've reached a certain level, because they then see, oh my God, now I have these basic skills which my CV didn't have. Now I can just go out and go somewhere else. Great.
Yeah.
Go and building from the bottom is for me super important. And coaching people. I mean, the word coaching and the word making sure that people actually given the real amount of time they need to prosper, and I'll teach them, and over time I learn from them and I grow. That is for me the most important thing as managing people. So that one day when they go through their career, most of the people who I hired as associates, VPs, who are now directors or MDs, they've given more back to me over the years than I've given them in maybe the initial phases of their career. That's kind of really important.
That's lovely to hear, Stefan, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's all about people at the end of the day, whether in banking or I guess any profession, right? I mean, it's all about and of course, on the one hand, we are seeing the Amazonization of the world and robotification, and humans becoming like machines in a sense. So it is refreshing to talk to someone like yourself who puts people first and hires a way, not just by a tag on on a piece of paper, or whether the person is from Harvard or MIT or some fancy university, but really looks at the totality of things and how that person sees the world as a whole and can put different pieces together. And I think that's pretty interesting. And it's almost an engineering approach of seeing a totality of things, I guess, with a bit of EQ thrown in, and hiring in that sense. That's super. I'm so glad to hear that, because not everyone, not there'll be very few people I know that would just say I would hire a person who doesn't have a university degree, or who's, and that's kind of what you said, right? You said you don't even check what degrees that someone might have or not have, or it could be a diploma from some random place, or the person, or even less, but the person could just come in with so much, you know, uh, passion and intent, and an ability to reason and see things from a totality of things you said, and that's something which you personally seem to value.
It's a bit like the reverse from again, you understand what I'm saying, from what structures do, right? As a structure, you have lots of little pieces and you combine them and make them either sellable or make them into a solution, and then that's great. Eh, once you're maybe sitting more on top of a pile of an organization or a department or maybe a whole company, it's the reverse. You have that big, very complex thing. So you got to break it down into its pieces. So reverse engineer the process and then think through, are these pieces actually all kind of playing together well, and where is the friction cost of not being perfectly working together, and less important than the overall delivery of what the person does. And that's, I think, what I mostly did. I took my structuring approach from taking small pieces and build them into something complex, turned it around and try to look at something complex and break it down into individual pieces. Then execution becomes actually, whatever it might be, much easier. If I need to fill certain roles with people who are missing, or whether there's an element of change in the organization, then it becomes for me clearer what individual pieces I have to deal with, rather than just trying to do it with a top-down message. Guys, we got to change. We got to now build an FX business with local markets. Sounds great, but what does it actually mean? Let's break it down to what clients, what countries, what people, what systems. Then we can assign parts of it to a sequence, which then hopefully leads to outcome. That's maybe a bit more technocratic, a bit more engineering approach, but it has personally worked very well for me.
And just to drill a bit deeper down into this point, Stefan, so when you interview someone, what are the things that you would like to see? Now, obviously, I'm not going to talk about technical skills. I'm just taking that as a given.
Yep.
So beyond that, what is it that impresses you? And equally at the other end of the spectrum, what is a no-no in terms of situations or attributes that you have come across or might come across as you go around interviewing people, both at the associate level, or even at the director or MD level?
Yeah, I mean, one of my very first questions to virtually everybody who I'm interviewing is, can you explain to me where you actually have made and how you have made a personal decision? I look for people who, in whatever small context, maybe for junior people or higher up, larger context, how have you made a decision? And can you explain back to me why you made that decision? And then very soon I can see that there are people who actually have some kind of thinking behind what they're doing, and other people who are just doing because they've been told to do things. And some people then go into their skill sets of technical skills. Some people start to talk about more about how they balance risk and rewards. But it leads very fast to an understanding if the person I'm talking to actually has a framework of seeing himself as his personal business. That's what I would call it. I mean, if somebody understands his personal business, what inputs are they bringing to the table? What are their personal skills? What are their emotions? What can they leverage on? Whether they have their strength, and then translating this into a decision. I want to have people who are able to make and explain their decisions. I do not want to have people who are simply waiting for instructions and then saying, okay, I can do anything you want, boss, but just tell me what you want to be doing, then I'll execute. That would be for me, that I'm trying to figure out very first. And that's not driven by university education that's mostly driven by how people have grown up over their families or in their younger life, and then they can tell me, so why did you choose to go to this university? Why did you buy that type of car? And I ask very, very, very unrelated questions to the job, and then see if people have the ability to explain to me what they're doing. But that's what I'm looking for on a daily basis. I'm not micromanaging. I'm not trying to give people the daily instructions to how to live and breathe. But I want them, if necessary, come to me and then explain to me very fast, okay, what you have done so far, why have you done this? Not in a defensive way, but just explain to me. If I'm confident that people can explain to me what they're doing, and I'm confident that they can by themselves also handle things. So that's really the very, very first question. And it's surprisingly how many young people actually are able to do this. Those of you say, oh, snowflake generation, they don't know what they want, they're just all entitled, blah, blah, blah. Actually, I don't think so. I mean, there are lots of people who actually are having very, very clear views of what they want to, how they want to do it. Maybe they have their own assumptions of life, which are different from mine, but that doesn't mean they can't handle themselves in a complex environment in an organization. So that's what I'm looking for. Afterwards, of course, we have discussion about subject matter skills, and if then there are 4 or 5 people who have the same kind of level of expertise, and one has a better skill set, that then influences on the nuances what might be the outcome, but not as a starting point the skill sets of the specific whatever subject matter expertise, unless there's a very, very technical role to be filled. But that's quite often not the case for the more junior roles.
And how would these things change? How would your answer change for let's say, I mean, I know in banking the titles are different, but managing director or partner level person has to be hired by the firm, say your firm, and let's say you were interviewing that person. What is the 1 or 2 things that would, in a positive way, blow you away? And what would the 1 or 2 things that, in a not so positive way, piss you off, or if not piss you off, say, okay, this is not happening, and you put a strike off. So what are those? Just one, even one thing, or max 2?
Well, I can give you one word. I mean, directors, managing director levels, or the senior onwards partner level. I tell you the word, and then I explain what I mean. Somebody who has a risk and control framework or a risk and control mindset. So I don't mean by that somebody who says no to everything. I don't mean somebody who has the ability to decline everything like a negative person. At senior level, I want people to explain to me, without being prodded to explain, what they think a bank actually is and what they think on a daily basis might occur in their daily lives once they're hired. And the people who really, really blow me away in a positive way are those who are saying, look, I will start in whatever job I'm interviewing, and things will go wrong. The starting assumption is, as long as we are running a business, things will go wrong, and they can go wrong from slightly to spectacularly blowing up. And we have to agree among ourselves as senior people to what degree we are happy to things go wrong, and therefore obviously that's our risk appetite. And then we need to mitigate that we are not going above that threshold. And then we make sure that the business returns we are delivering pay us for that risk we are taking. Somebody who can explain this, what I just said in literally one sentence, in whatever words they're using, blow me away completely. Because quite often I see people not seeing that running a business is taking risks, and the risks need to be consumed with the returns you're getting. And if that doesn't play out, if people don't have that concept and don't understand that you not only have to chase the income, you also have to limit your downside to a degree where you're comfortable. Those people would be very, very hard for me to hire. So I have interviews where people come in and they tell me what glorious things they have done and what great outcomes they had. If you ask them, so did you actively manage your risk and control framework in any way? They're like, what? That normally is the end of the story. But if they can explain to me what they're doing, then that's why. So again, I'm not looking for compliance people. I'm not looking for people who are risk managers in the old sense of saying no to everything, but people who have an understanding that a proactive risk culture is what makes banks survive or fail. I mean, we have seen how a bad risk culture can drag banks and financial institutions down to the lowest level or to the non-existence. But if people can explain to me on a senior level that how they in their personal life deal with this, absolutely amazing. While of course still having the business owner mindset on, rather still explain to me, well, this control framework doesn't become their life. It's just the foundation on which they build their business. That's completely awesome people on the senior level.
So I get the point on control framework. I get the point on risk and reward. That all makes sense. But from a values perspective, or from a non-technical, non-banking per se perspective, non-finance perspective, without using any jargon,
yeah,
what is it that you think you would look for in a senior hire? I think the junior part we get completely. So for let's say you were hiring, let me just call it a deputy CEO, just for the sake of discussion. Yep. What values, not skill sets, not so much the technical risk control, operational excellence, not all those things, but what values or what aspects of personality or emotional intelligence or social intelligence, or does that not matter at all? That would be a completely legitimate answer as well.
No.
If needed matters. So
no, I think, as I earlier said, the emotional intelligence to be able to put yourself into others' shoes and be able to understand how they look at something is in the end the skill set which is the most important one. So when I earlier talked about risk and control, again, you can't only have your top-down view of things. You need to be able to anticipate how things will look from the other side, bottom up or from sideways in. And somebody who has that emotional intelligence to put themselves into the shoes of other people, understand how other people would look at a certain scenario, and then make that viewpoint part of their own decision making. That's it. I mean, that's where you have then rounded individuals who are not just single-mindedly running into one direction and then trying to enforce their own preconceived notion of the truth onto whatever they are seeing, because that's quite often, well, it can lead to great outcomes, but then it's not necessarily what I would call an approach which is driven by skill, and it's more luck. So again, that emotional intelligence, ability to put yourself in the shoes of others, take those views into your decision making, that is for me a skill set on the senior level, which is critical, and that is for me another description of having a risk framework, because a risk framework is not just looking at risk from one angle. It takes the various views, but then still take the totality and make a decision. You can't just then say, okay, fine, I take analysis paralysis to the last degree and I never come to any conclusion. So that's, I think, where the senior people who are really impressing me come across as very, very, very good if they can do that.
On a personal note, Stefan, has there been any particular part or time in your career which you feel you have enjoyed the most or had the most fun in? And if so, what's that and why? Or what happened?
Most fun, yeah. I mean, I think the most, that doesn't sound like fun, but when RBS decided, and many institutions did this, to actually separate parts of their business as going to go forward and separate other parts into an unwind scenario, and actually working through that process and making both the people in go forward happy that they have roles to do, but also giving the people who are in the unwind part the very clear career path, so what comes from it, and convince them that whatever is right now happening is not the end of the world. So I had to deal with both sets of people, and both of them actually walked away in a weird way satisfied. That was for me the most fun, because it basically was that moment when you say, okay, now we've taken a decision which fundamentally impacted the lives of individuals, their families, in a really profound way. One set was told, in a few years' time, you all lose your jobs, or in a few months' time, but you got to work it through now and get things done. Here's what we do for you, and if you do this for us, give them a very, very clear perspective of why this is not the end of the world. And they came all on the other end as much, much stronger people. Of course, giving people to go forward, you right away saying, here's your business to run. That's so satisfying, because it gives people then the ability to go home and say to their family, to their partners, to their kids, look, I had a good day at work today. I've been given a chance to do something. And that's what I personally always look for. I can go home and tell my family, look, I enjoy my job because there's some reason why I'm doing it. So family first is for me a very important personal parameter, which I will always tell people when I speak to them what they should expect of me. If there's ever a conflict between family and work, my family will come first. So people should not be mistaken on that one. And if I can influence people's lives such that they can go home and make their families more confident that something good is coming from it, that's a real fun part. So that was happening in that transition period where we cut a big bank into two pieces, and not only giving the good immediate news to the people who stay, but also giving the people who will eventually go a really strong perspective why this is not the end of the world. And guess what? They've all come out of it at the end stronger, including myself. And that's, I think, where I got my CEO role from. I have worked through both sides of the equation, not just running a business and building it, but also working it through hard times when the message is not easy, it's not nice, and it doesn't mean it's the end of it. I don't know if you've seen this little cartoon. I have it on my desk here. It's in a frame. I can't take it out. It's a person being stuck into the ground and being buried under the ground, and it says, the next picture it says, when you feel like you're being shoved underground, you're being buried dead. Well, guess what? I mean, the next picture is something growing out from the ground. That's kind of, for me, quite an important picture. It's quite often about the timing of when good things will come again. It's not the immediate negative impact, which should be throwing people into depression. A bit philosophical, but personally, I've gone through this journey at least 2 or 3 times in the last 6, 7, 8 years, and therefore I feel this is helping me a lot.
I'm going to pick on 2 words you said. 1, buried in the ground, and 2, a bit philosophical, and ask you my next question, which is, how do you deal with situations when you feel that you're being buried in the ground, i.e. situations of great stress? What are the mechanisms you use to deal with it, to cope with it, get around it, get through it? And, some people might deal with it just philosophically and say, okay, some people would have specific tools. Some people might, think of they spend more time with a little bit of time with their families and have a kind of a mindfulness moment with their own families, or play a sport or meditate. And I'm just curious, what works for you?
What works for me best is I spend time with my family. Very, very simple. I mean, if at work things are very tough, I go home, or I either spend time with my wife or daughter or son, or all together, and just completely focus on what is important for the family, rather than just really switching off, and meaning in the most complete sense, not just having the BlackBerry or the iPhone in the pocket and staring at every 2 minutes. Just completely switch off. Lucky I can do that. I can literally go from the office to home within half an hour and just have forgotten about work. And I can switch on necessary half day and next morning again. So that's for me very important. The ability to just walk away and just literally for that moment forget about work and just do something completely different. Look at me. I'm not the person who goes for a long run or does some strenuous mountain climbing. That's not for me. But I'm very much doing for the family. The one thing which I do with the family, which is then a practical thing, I love cooking for the family. I love cooking for the family. I can go home. I can then focus on taking a recipe or taking something I want to make, and then just focus on that one. I make the dough with my daughter for the pasta, or prepare some meat, some brining process, elaborate procedures to get it onto the table, and then I can indulge myself immediately, and I forget all the rest about it. So that's for me how I switch off. It's not the end result of eating well. That's also good. You can look at my body shape, but the process of cooking, the process of creating a meal for the family is probably for me the most relaxing and then switch off ability I can do.
It is a very mindful thing. Cooking, as we know, it's both creative and mindful, relaxing. Some people do gardening, and in your case, it's cooking. So that's totally awesome. Well, Stefan, thanks. That's really been the chat. I think has been exceeded my expectations, in the sense I think we talked about some interesting subjects, and